I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, honestly. Lisa and I had been married for 8 years, and for the most part I thought we had a decent life. Sure, we had our arguments, usual stuff about money or how she never helped around the house, but I never suspected it'd go this far. We've got 2 kids, a mortgage, the whole 9 yards. I believed she loved me, or at least that's what I told myself. At first I started noticing little things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her getting defensive when I asked about her day, or how she'd suddenly be exhausted after work. But then she'd disappear into the bedroom for hours with her phone. Nothing too blatant, but enough to make me suspicious. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was stressed, maybe she was working late. But deep down, I knew something was off. It all started to seem worse when she began acting bitchy, snapping at me over stupid stuff, rolling her eyes when I tried to talk to her, and snapping at the kids more than usual. She'd make these little comments about me not being enough, how I wasn't doing enough around the house, how she was stuck. I'd ask what was wrong and she'd wave me off with some excuse like I'm just tired, leave me alone. But I could tell she was hiding something. I just didn't want to admit it. Then came the real bombshell, something I never expected to find out about. It was a random day, just like any other, but I decided to check her phone out of curiosity. I'd always been cautious about snooping, but something was pushing me. I found a series of texts that made my stomach drop. They weren't just friendly or flirty, they were damn explicit. She'd been messaging some guy named Mike from her support group, saying all kinds of things. How much she loved the way he looked in uniform, how she missed seeing him, how she was so tired of pretending everything's okay. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My wife, the woman I fought for, the one I'd shared my life with, was cheating on me. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. There were messages every day, even during the times she was supposed to be with me or the kids. I kept scrolling, my hands trembling, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't sleep that night, replaying all the signs I ignored, all the little clues that pointed to this. How did I miss it? How did I not see that she'd been lying right to my face? And the worst part, the evidence was right there, right in her own messages. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I also wanted to be smart about it, to have some leverage. So I decided to wait. I needed to see what she'd say, if she'd even admit the truth. I'd heard enough lies from her already, so I wasn't exactly hopeful. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her keep lying to me. Not anymore. The next day, I knew I had to face her. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to approach her without losing my mind completely. She came home from her support group, meeting like nothing had happened, smiling, acting like everything was normal. That made my blood boil even more. How could she sit there and pretend everything was fine? I felt like I was losing my grip. I decided I wasn't going to beat around the bush. As soon as she sat down, I put her phone right in front of her and said, "Who the hell is Mike? And why have I been seeing these messages?" Her face froze for a second, then she started with her usual bullshit, trying to brush it off, calling it just some guy from her group, saying he was harmless, and that I was reading too much into it. She looked annoyed, like I was invading her privacy. That made me even angrier. I told her I knew everything about the messages, about her sneaking around. Her eyes widened for a second, then she rolled her eyes and spat out some excuse about needing someone to talk to, about how it's just some stupid fling, and that I was overreacting. She called me paranoid, accused me of not trusting her, and said I was just jealous because she was more attractive than other women. That's when I saw her true colors. That bitch was trying to turn it around on me, make me feel like I was the one in the wrong, but I wasn't about to be duped again. I told her that I saw the texts, that I knew she'd been lying about her meetings, about everything. And her response? She got defensive, swearing she never cheated, she'd never do something that disrespectful, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're just insecure. You think every woman is out to cheat on you. Maybe you should look in the mirror." That was the moment I realized how manipulative she could be. She's always been good at lying, good at hiding stuff, but this time she had gone too far. I felt the rage boiling inside me. I wanted to break something, scream at her, shake her until she confessed everything. But I kept my cool. I told her I wanted the truth, and I wanted her to leave the house for a few days so I could think. Her reaction was to call me possessive and crazy, and she stormed out the door, slamming it behind her like she didn't care. That was the worst part, knowing she didn't even respect me enough to stay and face what she'd done. That night I stayed up all night staring at the ceiling trying to process what this all meant. I felt hurt, betrayed, and angry, but also numb. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? I kept thinking about the kids, about what this would do to our family. I never thought I'd be in a situation where she'd cheat, especially with someone so high up, an army commander no less. It's like she picked the worst person possible to cheat on me with, and she got caught because I was stupid enough to check her phone. Part of me wanted to confront her again, demand she confess everything, throw her out of the house. But I also knew I had to be smart. I needed a plan. Because once I was sure she'd lied, I wasn't going to let her keep pulling this crap. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I refused to be a fool. I was angry, but I knew I had to keep my head clear. And I knew without a doubt that this was the end of it. Over the next couple of days, I stayed silent, trying to gather my thoughts and figure out what I wanted to do. Every time I saw her face, I felt this mix of rage and heartbreak boiling inside me. I was angry that she'd lied so blatantly, that she'd cheated with not just anyone but a damn army commander during family support meetings, like she thought she could get away with it forever. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover what I felt. It was like my entire world was crashing down piece by piece. But I also knew I had to be strategic. I wanted to catch her in the act again, or at least get concrete proof. I couldn't just take her word for it anymore. So I started to watch her carefully. I installed some hidden cameras in the house, mostly in the living room and the bedroom. Nothing obvious, just small things that wouldn't make her suspicious. I didn't want her to know I was onto her, at least not yet. I had a sinking feeling she'd try to cover her tracks, so I wanted to be ready. I also kept an eye on her schedule. She'd claim she was working late or at her support meetings, but I didn't buy it anymore. I started checking her emails, her social media, anything that could give me a clue. Sure enough, I found more messages, this time on her email, where she'd been exchanging secret texts with Mike, talking about their secret rendezvous and how hot it was to be sneaking around during her support meetings. She'd even arranged to meet him at a nearby hotel last weekend, right in the middle of her supposed support group hours. That was it. I had all the evidence I needed. I felt sick to my stomach, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't imagining things. She had been lying to my face, doing this behind my back while I was working, trying to pretend everything was normal. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. For years, I'd trusted her, loved her, supported her, while she was out there screwing around with a guy who was supposed to be my superior. That thought made my blood boil even more. How sick is that? I decided I would confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I waited until she came home late from her so-called support group, and I set everything up. I wanted her to admit it publicly, to see her squirm. I wanted her to know I wasn't just some fool who'd get over it. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. When she finally walked in, I was sitting in the living room, my arms crossed, the camera feed on my phone discreetly recording her every move. She looked surprised, then defensive. Tried to brush past me like nothing was wrong, but I blocked her way. "Lisa," I said coldly, "I know what you've been doing. I know about Mike. I know about the hotel last weekend. Don't lie to me anymore. I have the proof." Her face went pale for a second, then she started with her usual lies, how she was just talking to him, how nothing happened, how she was just lonely and made a mistake. I could see her trying to spin her story, but I wasn't buying it. I told her I'd had enough of her bullshit, that I wasn't going to be played anymore. I told her she could lie, deny, scream, whatever she wanted, but I had the evidence and I was done. That's when she snapped. She threw a fit, called me jealous, accused me of spying because I didn't trust her. She told me I was crazy, that I was overreacting, and that I was possessive. But her eyes were darting around, and I knew she was panicked. She knew I'd caught her. The lies she'd been feeding me all these years were crumbling piece by piece. In that moment, I felt a strange mixture of relief and despair. Relief because I finally knew the truth, and despair because I'd lost my wife over a stupid affair. I looked at her and saw the bitch she really was, selfish, manipulative, and cold. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I told her she had to leave immediately, and that I was done. I told her I wanted her out of my life, that I didn't want to see her face again until she was ready to admit what she'd done and apologize. She screamed, called me a monster, accused me of ruining everything. But deep down, I knew I was doing what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in this lie. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and anger, knowing that my marriage was over, not because of some random affair, but because she chose to throw everything away for a guy who didn't even respect her. I was hurt, but I was also angry enough to finally start thinking about what comes next. I wasn't sure how I was going to get past this, but I knew one thing: I was done being a fool. After she left that night, I stayed up for hours just sitting in the dark, staring at the empty spot where she used to sleep. My mind was a tornado of rage, sadness, and confusion. I kept replaying everything: her lies, her sneers, the way she'd look at Mike like he was some kind of hero. Honestly, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How could the woman I loved, the mother of my kids, betray me so blatantly? It's almost like I didn't even know her anymore. I kept thinking about what I'd do next. Part of me wanted to burn everything, to erase her from my life completely. But another part of me, the rational part, knew I had to handle this smartly. I decided to start by contacting a lawyer. I knew I'd need legal advice about custody, assets, and the best way to move forward with minimal damage. I also made sure to save every piece of evidence I had: screenshots, emails, messages. I wasn't going to let her deny this later, no matter how much she tried. Over the next couple of days, I kept a low profile. I was on edge all the time, afraid she'd try to pull some stunt or spin her lies again. I kept the cameras running just in case. I began to realize that her behavior was changing. She started calling and texting me, pretending to be sorry, saying she was confused, and asking if we could just talk. But I knew better. I wasn't falling for that anymore. I was done playing her game. One afternoon, she showed up at my house unannounced, knocking on the door like she still had some right to be there. When I didn't answer, she started shouting through the door, crying and begging me to give her another chance. She even claimed she was sorry for hurting me, that she'd made a mistake, and that she loved me. It was so obvious she was just trying to manipulate me, trying to guilt me into taking her back. But I wasn't falling for it. I told her to leave, that I didn't want to see her or hear from her again. That was the moment I knew I had to cut ties completely. I couldn't keep pretending to be okay, not anymore. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she'd thrown it all away. I felt like I was losing my mind, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been a fool for so long, believing she was this perfect wife and mother. Turns out, she was just good at hiding her true nature. As I sat there watching her walk away, I understood that this was the end of our marriage. I knew I had to pick myself up and start over, even if it felt impossible right now. I also knew I'd never trust her again, not fully. And I wasn't sure if I could forgive her, not ever. But I did know that I had to protect myself and my kids from her lies and manipulations. Whatever happens next, I was determined to rebuild my life without her. That betrayal had opened my eyes, and I wasn't going back to the way things were. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, packing, and trying to keep it together for the kids. Honestly, the worst part was the silence in the house. Every room reminded me of what I'd lost, and every sound seemed to echo her lies. I kept feeling this gnawing ache in my chest, a mixture of heartbreak and fury. I was angry at her for throwing everything away, but mostly at myself for not seeing it sooner. How blind had I been? How could I have missed the signs? I knew I had to stay strong for the kids, for myself. I started talking to a lawyer about how to proceed, about getting custody and protecting my interests. I also contacted a therapist, just to keep my head clear. Every time I thought about her with Mike, with her sneaking around during meetings where she was supposed to be supporting her family, I'd get this sick feeling in my stomach. I kept replaying that night I found her messages, her lying to my face about everything. It's like I'd been living in a nightmare and I couldn't wake up. Meanwhile, she kept trying to reach out, calling me sorry, promising she'd change, that she just lost her way. I couldn't believe how manipulative she was. She'd even send me texts saying she missed us and that she wanted to fix everything, but I knew better. I knew her game now. She was just trying to keep me hanging on, to keep me from finally cutting the cord. I wasn't falling for it anymore. I had seen her true face, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her web. One day, she showed up unexpectedly at the house again, crying and begging to come back. She said she realized how much she'd hurt me and that she was sorry for everything. I looked at her coldly and told her to get lost. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, that she'd broken our family beyond repair. She snapped, calling me a heartless bastard, saying I was ruining her life, but I didn't care. I was beyond caring. I was only thinking about how I could move on and protect my kids from her chaos. That night, I finally sat down and started drafting a plan. I knew I had to rebuild, to start over from scratch. I also knew I needed to be cautious. She was manipulative and cunning. I began focusing on my career and the kids. I made a vow to myself. I'd never let her cheat, lie, and manipulate me again. No more excuses, no more denial. I was done living in her shadow, done pretending everything was okay when it was. Looking back now, I realize how much this has changed me. I'm stronger than I thought I was. I've learned that trust can be broken in an instant, and that sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's gone wrong. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I won't be blind again. I'll rebuild my life piece by piece and make sure my kids see what real strength looks like. I've lost my wife, but I'm not giving up on myself or my family. Not after everything I've been through. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this experience has torn me apart, but also made me realize what really matters. I used to think marriage was about trust, about sticking through thick and thin, but I've learned that sometimes people show you who they truly are only after they've betrayed you in the worst way. It's a hard lesson, but one I had to learn the hard way. I've since moved out of the house, found a new place for myself and the kids, and started focusing on healing. It's not easy. Some days feel heavier than others. The pain of betrayal doesn't just go away overnight. But I've come to accept that I did everything I could, and ultimately, I have to protect myself and my children from further damage. Looking back, I see that her lies and manipulations weren't just about cheating. They were a betrayal of everything we built together: the trust, the life we shared, the promises we made. I can't undo what happened, but I can control how I move forward. I've learned to listen to my instincts and not ignore the red flags anymore. Trust is earned, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. I don't hate her. Not fully. I feel sorry for her, actually. She's chosen this path, and I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. As for me, I'll focus on my kids, on my own recovery. I'll rebuild my life brick by brick with honesty and strength. And I'll remind myself that I deserve better. I deserve someone who values honesty, loyalty, and respect, not a wife who cheats with a damn army commander during family meetings. So here's my final advice to anyone out there going through something similar. Trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs, and don't be afraid to walk away if you know deep down it's over. It hurts like hell at first, but in the end, it's better to be alone than with someone who doesn't truly love you. I've lost a lot, but I've gained clarity. And that's worth everything.